The way of me making change is to be as judgmental as possible about other people. That's not activism. That's not bringing about change.
How could people be so willing to participate in such a barbaric practice over a difference of opinion?
Again, this just shows how easy it is to fake stuff, especially when you're a burner account that has no accountability.
It seems obvious, but canceling is one of those words that's lost all meaning because it's become an umbrella term for whatever one wants it to.
Over the last few days, I've been seeing a lot of drama and petty peas that made me a little angry. This has to do with the internet and cancel culture. This is something I wanted to discuss because we all know about it and we criticize the Twitter mob for it. We also talk about the impact this has on people's livelihoods, but it's kind of ironic that the culture that is meant to put a spotlight on terrible people would be used by terrible people. I don't want to say that everyone who participates in cancel culture is toxic, but it does have an impact due to the lack of ignorance. They have dangerous repercussions on many people, since they essentially give power to hate mobs and people who try to virtue signal. Granted, they have done some good in the past, but the good doesn't outweigh the bad things done by the whole movement. Oftentimes, this gives an insane amount of speaking power to a vocal minority. They have the power to end someone's career as well as their livelihoods. And you're telling me, dumbasses are capable of handling this kind of power? Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to give them so much power to do this.
Since you wanted to get your message out there, I'd help you out and find your entire family and message them your TikTok. Your family's originally from the Virgin Islands, right? And you've got family in Houston, Texas, and in Florida, right?
After Dream's numerous scandals, including a moment of Gumball's VA, as well as his whole essay allegations, it made me question this whole cancel culture. So now that I have your attention, I have to explain what is cancel culture and why it's not really a good thing. So if you have been living under a rock or have been away from the internet, I will give you a quick explanation. According to the Merriam-Webster, cancel culture refers to the mass withdrawal of support from public figures or celebrities who have done things that aren't socially accepted today. So to put it simply, cancel culture ostracizes, boycotts, or even protests against a public figure. These practices are as old as time, which can happen in the workplace and friend groups. Hell, if you think about it, in the American Revolution, it was a huge cancellation of King George III. The difference today is it's done in another way through social media, which is scary because of how social media allows people to voice their opinions to a broad audience, regardless of following or influence. Social media keeps people connected and allows us to share opinions with little repercussions because of our anonymity, which is something we all expect for good reason. The internet is a scary place, and that's why we expect privacy to be a top priority. But sadly, that's something public figures don't have the luxury of doing because they're at a higher risk of being doxxed or harassed by anyone. But even if you want to be anonymous, you run the risk of being doxxed if people are up to the task. Before Dream was a public figure, he would go to extreme lengths to hide his face, and yet people somehow found out not only who he was and what he looks like, but they found out his family's information. Like, goddamn! The internet is scary, and it's not the kind of place that will hold back when you end up in a shit list. Whole-ass hate campaigns can be used to cancel people, and sometimes it works to varying degrees. Sometimes you actually manage to stop dangerous people from having a platform, which is a good thing, and it is an intended purpose. But the thing with that is that people who don't deserve to be cancelled have their whole livelihood ruined. Meanwhile, people who have shown signs of terrible or downright psychotic behavior get to keep their platform with nothing more than a slap on the wrist. Cancel culture has tackled problems regarding power abuse, on people for terrible behavior, and essentially having people face consequences. But the same people who claim to be fighting against abuse and injustices would soon use similar tactics against people for many reasons. This becomes a never-ending cycle of cyberbullying. Now that we know what it is and a little bit of its side effects, where did this start? Cancel culture doesn't really have a specific origin, since what cancel culture does is, as previously stated, a form of isolation or loss of public support for people in power, but the term was coined in the 2010s and 2020s, when more people became more and more aware of political awareness, which has its humble origins. As the old saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Cancel culture and political correctness was done to protect those who are in a more vulnerable position, but it soon would turn toxic, People considered the Me Too movement to be the catalyst for this cancel culture, since women finally had a voice to speak out against people in power. Like Harvey Weinstein, who was one of the people who would get called out and has been convicted for several counts of sexual misconduct. Eventually, the movement was weaponized by people who were in it for selfish reasons. This would be the spark that would start some of the biggest harassment campaigns on the internet. Political correctness movement would aim to help minorities from being oppressed, and soon they would engage in witch hunts that would target people who didn't deserve it. Personally, I think it's fine for people to be called out for being discriminatory or racist, but people took things way too far, such as the Latinos being mad at Eminem for doing the Mexican cosplay, which in actuality is a Spanish bullfighter, and I think it's hilarious how unaware Eminem is about the difference. But this is harmless, such a little bizarre, but not a really serious thing, yet people made it a problem. This is where Twitter comes in. They make problems out of nothing to farm engagement, and this is where cancel culture gains its toxic aspect, because it's most likely the Twitter freaks causing this shit. But the problem is that Twitter is so widely used, so information travels fast. Regardless of the truth, people can get in trouble over baseless rumors. Dream is one of the unlucky few where people made baseless accusations and it went through the hell. Granted, the whole Dream situation is very difficult to explain because of just how many allegations were made against him. Plus, Dream gets way too much hate from everyone, and personally, he's not the kind of guy I would watch, but damn, the amount of harassment that he went through is insane. People had hated him so much they jumped at the chance to dogpile. Multiple people came forward to give the story of Dream being a creep in their DMs, but one accuser who stuck out said he had a history of this behavior and were planning to take this to court. Or so they said. That person was a girl named Amanda, who was an early fan of Dream, and she had contact with him because Dream would text her. Before we get at pitchforks, I want to preface this. I don't think it's bad for influencers to talk to fans as long as it stays somewhat normal or professional, especially when minors are involved, because it could lead to more problems if one gets too close to their fans, as well as creating a sort of parasocial relationship. Granted, parasocial relationships can happen even without interacting with fans, but this only makes people feel closer to the person because they're in close contact. Take Dream for example. He would respond to fans or people who sent DMs to him, at least in his early days, which enabled that parasocial relationship which Amanda used to her advantage to paint a narrative against Dream. Dream isn't clean, but it is worth noting that he was talking to her instead of blocking her. He would keep her around. He wasn't a creep. He had harmless intentions, but his good intentions were made out to be worse than they seem. I personally don't think he is creepy or weird. Trust me. I forced my editor to look into the files, and he found nothing too weird, and a lot of the arguments used against him were done in bad faith and used to paint a narrative. But Dream's problem was that he was a bit parasocial with Amanda, and we would try to cut her off, she would turn on him and start to slander him, and we were none the wiser. Heck, I have to admit I believed the allegations before looking at the evidence, which would be faulty at best, and Amanda would basically do this for some petty drama. But the weird part is that Dream went to several police departments in different counties and asked if a police report was ever filed, and there was nothing from all these allegations. Nothing ever came up, and on top of that, he got a lawyer involved, and he went through a lot of text and evidence just to prove his innocence. He went through the struggles a detective would normally go through, all in this to prove his innocence, and on social media, which it shouldn't really matter. But in this day and age, first impressions and reputation matters more than anything, which is why Dream went through the trouble of disproving said controversies. Like sure, if it was word of mouth, maybe it's easy to ignore, but this was a slander campaign peddled by haters and a disgruntled fan. This is the dangers of cancel culture, which makes it easy to weaponize people's savior complexes, and oftentimes they are quick to jump to conclusions. Dream got off the hook because he was ready to fight to the end. The things he did were understandably weird, but not predatory. He still isn't scot-free, since people still think he did some things, and aren't willing to listen since Dream is one of the most hated creators out there. There are some people who are falsely accused of being creeps. Take SVB, a coach for Overwatch. He is a nice person who would help new players and would provide content for them. A user called Swag Tortoise would call out SVB under the username Naya. He would make up a story about Naya being ruined by SVB, and people bought it. This man had no contact with said person. Swag Tortoise did this shit for the lulz. Like, who the fuck thinks it's okay to ruin someone's career just to prove a point about cancel culture? His name was dragged through the mud, and his reputation probably won't recover. Hell, to prove how much of a nice guy he is, SVB decided against suing the person who made his life a living hell.
clearly state that these accusations were proven to be false. They were made by a troll account, a young boy from what we can gather, 14, as some people have told me, who made a fake account pretending to be a 17-year-old black woman, who then later confessed that the whole thing was a prank and that they simply wanted to show the community how, in their words, cringe it is and how easily it would cancel anyone. I've rambled for long enough. Thank you for those of you who stuck around. And again, I just want to emphasize that this really has nothing to do with real victims of grooming or sexual misconduct. So please continue to show kindness, continue to believe women who speak out, but also please allow those accused the chance to present their story, to be kind to them, to everyone involved until you know more, to show human empathy, because in my mind, if you only reserve empathy for a select group of people, that's not empathy. That's just bias.
This goes to show how volatile cancel culture really is. People who don't deserve to get cancelled get harassed because people hate them, or some keyboard warriors get too eager to cancel someone. The thing that Dream and SVB have in common is that they were accused. Then people dogpiled on them based on some screenshots that could have been faked, as well as false testimonies, and finally, when things come to light, the people who made the false accusations would just leave the internet without taking accountability. It's scary that this can happen since it invalidates the victims who actually come out with truthful information, since people would still harass them for telling their side. But let's look at the other side of the spectrum and look at the people who should be removed from social media for whatever reason they don't face any real punishment. Think SSS Sniper Wolf, the golden child who made YouTuber bitch. Granted, she did get cancelled, but people who could actually have the power to do something like, I don't know,
demonetize her after doxing another creator.
As well as the Smash community who during 2020 put out several people for misconduct involving top players in the scene, which is understandable, and many people came out with genuine stories. But there are two top players who got outed for their behavior, those being Zero and Nairo. Zero was outed for being inappropriate with a minor, and the other stories of him just being a freak. The only story that was true was him talking to an underage girl named Katie, which was inappropriate, and I'm not going to defend him on that. That was not all of the allegations. Another content creator called Jisoo would accuse him of harassment, and the whole community would shun him in an instant. When the pressure got to him, he would buckle and admit to the allegation that levied by Katie, which was proven to be true. But this opened a floodgate of him admitting to all the allegations whilst under distress. In his words, this was intended to be his last message before he took his life. His now wife, Vanessa, would corroborate the story and say that Zero would admit to all the allegations just in the hopes of people forgetting about him and let him be at peace. Before people say this is an open and shut case all because he admitted to the allegations, but in the past people have confessed to terrible crimes under huge amounts of stress, and it's even a phenomenon that psychologists would study. Zero was under heavy scrutiny and was suffering from mental health issues, which made his testimony invalid. He would eventually come out with his side and admit that when he flirted with Katie, who was 14, whilst he was 19, Katie only explained her side and never really spoke on the controversies. She just wanted her story to be heard. Not much came out of it besides flirty texts, although he confessed to all the allegations under distress because Jisoo would not stop lying and she did it for clout and attention. Even though throughout their time together, Zero was supporting her as a friend, and she would use this against him. People were quick to judge and call him out. Sure, he deserved to be banned from events, but this is where I find the whole cancel culture thing dumb, is the fact that Nairo was also accused of misconduct with another top player who was a minor, this player being Captain Zack. I'm going to preface this, but Zack is no saint. In fact, he caused this whole situation because he would use his status as a minor to put Nairo in a worse light. Sure, having relations of this kind with a minor is inappropriate, inexcusable, and illegal. But Zack was an instigator. Zack has a history of trapping older men in the Smash Bros. Community. So the story goes that Zack and Nairo had a sexual encounter while Zack was a minor. So when things came to light, Zack claimed that Nairo was manipulating him and tried to pay hush money, as well as accusing Nairo, threatening to retaliate if news was out. Nairo would go quiet for a while and bring out a lawsuit against Zack, which was the right thing to do. He would not go on to elaborate much about what happened, but he did say that he was manipulated by the kid after going to therapy. Apparently his encounter made him realize he was a victim. Which, I want a second to pause. How the hell do you get manipulated by a teenager? I get that Zack had dirt on Nairo, but this entire situation could have been avoided if Nairo had set some boundaries up in the first place. He said that he was dense to that type of attraction, but the fact that they were flirting online and shit makes me second guess and believe he wasn't clueless. A lot of people noticed that they were close. Top player Tweak would also say that he warned Nairo and Zack about sharing a room, knowing that there was something between them. Top player DaBuzz said it best in this clip.
I remember actually a situation happened to me that was awkward. It was during Civil War, and this is something else I don't really like talking about. I remember Zack tried saying something flirtatious with me, right? And I just pushed him away immediately. I said no, and I stopped that immediately, and that was that. Because I knew that was not okay, and I knew this just needed to stop. And it wasn't like continued harassment or anything by him at all. He's a younger kid that was very open-minded. And I remember saying, no, this is not okay. And I had nothing against him for that at all, because it was, as the adult, it was my responsibility.
People in the community would stake their reputation by supporting Nairo with #UnbanNairo, which popped off and people came out in support of Nairo. Fellow top players claimed to have seen the document, but they signed an NDA and couldn't elaborate. So in this case, what is true is that Nairo and Zack had relations. He went to therapy and got an attorney. Then, he and Zack reached a legal agreement, which doesn't mean one or the other's guilty of anything. Think of it like a truce they were made between each other, which specifies what is or isn't allowed to be done, like, I don't know, reveal the full story. Nairo, alongside Zack and another Smash player, had a cover-up story, until Zack spilled the beans. Nairo isn't clean, but we are supposed to take into consideration that this lawsuit has everything to prove his innocence, yet no one questions it? People say that he doesn't need to prove his innocence because it could worsen his lawsuit, and how he was an irresponsible adult, but like, it isn't any basic knowledge to not get involved with minors. I mean, you have to be living under a rock to not know that detail. I don't buy it. Let's look at Dream one last time, since he was in the similar predicament where he had to make a response to clear his public image. He has a lawsuit pending, but he also talked about the events in detail. You're starting to see a pattern here in the case of being accused of misconduct. During the Me Too movement, Captain Zack and his co-conspirators were outed and are not allowed back into the community. All but Nairo. He is able to collab with other people in the community, allowed back into tournaments, and supported during the #UnbanNairo by a lot of the Smash Bros. Figureheads. One thing I forgot to mention was the fact that Katie doesn't have all the text between her and Zero, including an explicit fantasy relating to ice cubes and other more NSF texts she mentioned in her twit longer. Technically, there is no proof he did or didn't do it, aside from testimonies from both him and Katie. Nairo is in a similar position where we don't know the full details. Why is Zero shunned while Nairo is accepted? This is a blatant nepotism. Nairo is loved and Zero isn't. It's simple as that. Zero is permanently banned, but Nairo isn't, which makes it strange. Why not ban both, since they're both admitted to doing something, and it's better not to take chances? In this story, no one is a hero, but the way the community handled this, and the fact that cancel culture made people go feral and made the whole community destroy each other, makes cancel culture not as effective as we think. Cancel culture lost its intended goal in favor of people who want to uphold morals they don't even believe in or truly support. It's kind of bizarre that the situation has reached this level. The preferential treatment that cancel culture offers to some individuals and not others is crazy. When they hate someone, they will do everything in their power to ruin them, and they hide under the guise of upholding morals. The amount of misinformation that spreads is insane. For the love of God, I think, or I heard, is not valid in any court. There is a legal system put in place to make sure people don't just spread misinformation or commit perjury. It is a method that, even though not perfect, tries to hear out both sides and tries not to jump into any conclusions. Laws are put in place in order to not convict anyone based on personal opinion. But in cancel culture, this kind of harassment is too common, and there aren't any checks and balances. Since, if you don't allow people to speak up, then you could be infringing on people's right to freedom of speech. Or in a dark turn, you would essentially silence actual victims who actually have a story. With the added anonymity, people can say things with little consequences. Very few times do people with false allegations see any real consequences, and in time, they are forgotten. Meanwhile, the person accused has lasting damage to their reputation, especially if people believe they are guilty. This is a Sisyphus dilemma of sorts, because we can't really strip people of their privacy due to the potential harm it could cause. But, at the same time, absolute anonymity makes it impossible to track someone down if they take precaution. The only other way to get any real information is to dox someone, and that is illegal for obvious reasons. It is a nuanced problem that we are facing just due to the fact that misinformation is easy to spread. With social media, it is easy to make up accusations, and people have actual tools to fake evidence. It is insane. With this, people will be split into two groups: those who buy the whole story regardless of it being true, or the other side who doesn't believe it at all. Whatever the case is, this causes infighting within the community, and no real conclusions comes out, and the only important statements tend to be the loudest ones. If an accused doesn't speak out fast enough, people wonder if they are guilty or they're hiding something. But if they speak out too fast, they might not have a well thought out defense, which is ultimately a lose-lose for the accused. It doesn't offer a fair trial to anyone, and then no real conclusion comes unless the accusations are serious. That damage to a public figure's reputation might have lasting damage, and it becomes harder to find opportunities. People don't give others time to grow and change from the past mistakes, but at the same time, they drop the ball when serious allegations come up. I truly don't know how this problem will be solved. It is a nuanced that only exists because of the internet's ability to connect to others. Let me know what you think. I want to hear what solutions you could come up with, and what are your thoughts on the subject. Leave a like and subscribe.